Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm Jim West, CEO and founder of TopCyberPro.com, and I have a wonderful guest today. I mean, this guy's got a plethora of titles, plethora like CISO, cyber strategist, published author, international speaker. The man's got titles and titles for days, but I'm just going to turn it over to him, let him talk about the work he does in cyber and who he is. So, this is Dan.
Hey, thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. So thank you. I actually what the work I do is I just follow my passion as far as identity and security strategy is where I spend a lot of my time, particularly with identity. I've talked for a number of years about how we have to change passwords. I was a very small voice in a sea of people clanging the bell of you cannot treat passwords the same way you do keys because people are not random number generators.
Yeah.
And thankfully, 863 came out, and so rock on. You ought to read that if you haven't. And yeah, I do a lot of stuff with identity. Regrettably, my organization did have a downsizing, so I'm currently on the street looking hungry, looking for my next gig. But love doing strategy work. I spent the last 3.5 years basically doing VC still work for a whole bunch of Fortune 500s, and been full-time security since 2000, and just love the profession. I this is probably about my fifth career if you count them up, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else. What an awesome place to be. Every day is different. You're doing good for the world and the people around you. It's really heartwarming.
Oh man. And let me just let the folks watching know that Dan is a titan in industry. I mean, he mentioned he started in 2000. This is back when tests were still in paper scantrons. I mean, if anyone watching can remember way back when, here's a name from the past, and this is the kind of that frontline group that Dan's a part of, Sean Harris, and rest in peace.
Oh
She
yeah,
started
yeah.
the CISSP, and I remember also doing the 250 questions 6 hour scantron. So back when things weren't all computer based testing yet. That's how far Dan goes back. But all that experience and that wealth of knowledge, and he's a perpetual student like I am, constantly reading, constantly studying, and sharpening the edge because that's what it takes to be the level of professional that Dan is. And as a consummate professional, this man is, I mean, he reads multiple books. We'll get into books a little bit later, but this man is just a beast when it comes to ingesting knowledge and just being at the top tier expert that he is. He's also
Oh,
an ISC Square advisory board member. So for those of you that hear about the CISSP and like a CCSP, I'm sorry, not a CCSP, correction, SSCP, or like the ISSAP, ISSEP, ISSMP, the concentrations, and of course there are new ones that we'll talk about a little bit later, certified in cybersecurity. They have a great listing of a catalog of certifications and training, and ISC Square is probably the most respected and reputable name when it comes to cybersecurity certifications. And he is an advisory board member, very influential board member. So could you maybe talk a little bit about ISC Square and like kind of, what your I guess your greatest hits has been being an advisory board member for them.
yeah, yeah. And technically, it's not advisory board. I'm on the board of directors,
I'm
but
sorry, board of
we
directors,
do have
correction.
no problem. Just want to because people joke for that going like, wait, I can't find him. We do have advisory boards, and advisory boards are exceptionally important. But I'm just a very avid volunteer. I've been volunteering for ISC2 now for gosh 20 years, 22 years. Got my certification in 2000. 20889 is my number. And August 25th, never forget it. And that was when it was 6 hours, 250 questions, Scantron, and it was a slog. And I
Yeah.
just remember finishing that up. I was in the Embarcadero area of San Francisco, went down off of the pier and got some nachos and a beer just to get some electrolytes in me, and my brain just hurt. But I did what a friend told me to do. And this is when you had to wait. Like I had to wait 4 weeks.
Up to six
And
weeks. Yeah, 4 to 6 weeks.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, up to six. And I was one of the first in the world to take the SSCP. Actually, the group I was in was the first in the world as a beta test. And that was actually 3 months until they had enough stats, right? Because you had enough statistics to be able to score it because the entire thing is based on stats. And I spent an hour and a half writing down because you can't share anything about the test, but you can take notes to yourself that you can never share with anybody else so that what did I struggle with? And so I spent like 90 minutes like, I didn't know this and I didn't know this and I didn't know that. sealed it up, put it in the gun safe. It's all secure. And then I notified that I passed, and we took that out and burned it in the fireplace. And
That was good. Actually,
yeah,
that's
it's
not a
it's
bad strategy. In the event you did fail, you would be able to beef up on the
you
gaps.
had your notes exactly, which is
Very
still
smart man. Very
yeah.
smart.
Well, a good friend told me that tip, and I'm glad I did it. I've not. Um, I have failed an exam. I failed one of the MCSE exams. And I protested because they had a bad question. They didn't agree. But anyway, but yeah, you have to be prepared for that. And I've been very fortunate. I've passed in the first time, all the rest of them. But yeah, you always have to be prepared. Like what if I don't? What's my
Right.
backup plan? Right. And don't take it personally. Like, a lot of folks don't.
Yep. They
Right.
beat themselves up
That's
too
fine.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe you just had a bad day,
Yeah.
right? Maybe you didn't sleep well the night before. There's lots of reasons.
Yeah, I
So,
usually tell people don't waste a second beating yourself up. Take all of that energy and angst and funnel it into focusing what you think you need to beef up on
right,
for the next
right,
attempt. Like the next attempt is all that matters, right? But
right,
I'll share quickly my Scantron CISP story. I was a defense contractor overseas, and they have this thing called DoD 8570, which are these baseline IT cyber certifications that you had to have.
right.
Now, I was an information assurance manager and had been one for years. And I never really needed the certification, but my program manager had said, "Hey, did you see my email that I sent a month ago?" I said, "Yeah, what about it?" He goes, "Well, I told you a month ago you needed to get your baseline certification. You need to get preferably the CISP. I think actually my contract said CISP, so I couldn't even do any of the others. And I found this out later. So he says, well, you didn't read the message, you didn't take heed to it. Now the core, the contract officer, is now telling me that you have to have it in the next 30 days or you have to demote, which is go back home." And I'm like, what? So I come back to my
Wow.
office feeling like, oh my God, the world's on my shoulders. I got to get smart on this CSP test. So I had this
Hmm.
wonderful civilian named Keith Craiglow who was working in my office, and Keith's like, "Jim, when's the last time you took a certification exam?" I said, "Back when I did like my MCSE MTE4. Like that's how long ago, like
Right.
mid 90s."
Yeah, yeah.
He goes, "A lot's changed. You may want to ease into this." So he said, "Why don't you just take Sec Plus as soon as possible, just to kind of gauge where you're at, and then maybe
Hmm.
do something like technical, like a CEH." So I said, "I'll do both."
That's
So
good advice. Yeah. Did you do
I did
that?
Sec Plus. So
Yeah,
on Monday morning of the next week, I took Sec Plus, rocked it. Then I took, I
yeah.
think, CEH on Tuesday night, rocked it as well. So I said, "God, I think I'm ready." So I went ahead and scheduled, and I had my test date for Friday morning of that week. I go in, there's about 20 something of us in this classroom on this army base overseas. And of course, they give the long instructions. They pass out the Scantrons, the pencils. And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to do all 250 questions and then I'll take a break and then I'm going to come back and do them again, like review all of it. That was
Oh,
my
oh,
strategy.
bad strategy.
Well, I
No,
tell you
bad
what
strategy.
happened. At an hour and 50 minutes, I was done and I was like, okay, I don't know if I want to do this again. So I asked for a break, threw some water on my face in the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror. I
Yeah.
said, "Do I really want to go through it?" I said, "No, I'm too mentally exhausted. Let the chips fall where they may." And luckily, 4 or 5 weeks later, I got the text message. I passed, and that the rest was history. So then I went for the next year. I made sure I checked every box of the 8570, and then I just some fire got ignited in me, and I just started a pursuit of what I call being a perpetual student. I said, okay, what is this ISSAP, MP, and EP? And the moment that someone said, "Oh, the EP is the hardest cyber exam on the planet," I was like, okay, challenge accepted. So I just went on a tear, got every concentration, got my SSCP, got like I got five EC councils now. I have seven GIAC certs. I just went on a tear because I said I'll never
Hmm.
be told that I don't have the certification to fill the job anymore. But not to get too deep in certifications, though, I want to get back and talking about the great work that you do in cyber, and I know you do a lot of like advisory type work and so forth. And I know there's some topics that you're very passionate about, and one of them
Hmm.
is something that we kind of take for granted, and it's multi-factor authentication. We'll start with this one because with multi-factor authentication, most people know it as two-factor, where they either through their bank sends them a code, they got to authenticate or use like Authy or some
Right.
other authenticator app to authenticate. Let's talk a little bit about like just like with multi-factor. Most people only know about two factors, but they don't understand there's multiple factors you can utilize in your
Right.
authentication approach. Can you maybe elaborate on? First, let's just let me know
Oh,
what
yeah.
authentication is. So I'll turn it over to you.
Exactly. So authentication, you can think of it as, base word is authentic. Are you authentically you? Right. So it's really about verification of a claim. I claim to be this person. Well, can you demonstrate that you are? And there are a number of proofs that you can provide. In the real world, we're very used to when hopefully you don't see the blue lights in your rearview mirror of being pulled over. But if you do, they're going to ask for your license, your registration, your proof of insurance almost universally.
Yep.
And your license is your ability to say, this is who I am, right? Your registration is this is the car, who the car is, or not what the car is, right? Who owns the car? And then hopefully those two are tied together, right? And so you have that same kind of thing. Your very first day at an employer, you're going to be showing some sort of identification, and you're going to be federating in using a credential outside the space, perhaps a driver's license, passport, one of those, to then forge a new credential as an employee of that organization, be it employee badge, your login, whatever. And now you've federated into that environment. And so now when you are preventing authentication, you log into Gmail, you log into TikTok, you log into whatever it is, right? You're providing proof, usually password, that you are who you say you are, because only you should know your password. And if you provide your password, then it should know that you are you. But passwords kind of stink, right? Can
Yeah.
we can we go PG-13? They suck, right?
Yes.
They
Really
really
so.
do. I mean,
Yeah.
they completely suck, right? It's one of the oldest technologies that we use on an everyday basis. When you think about it, it's not as old as fire, but older than the wheel.
Mhm.
Because you think about it, and this still happens. Halt who goes there is the modern day equivalent of Ungawa, right? Thug, is that you? Okay, good, good. You're not
Yeah.
a saber-toothed tiger. You can come into the camp, right? And that's an authentication process. You're part of the tribe. Come in. I recognize you. All right. And we recognize this really old technology. It's in the Kama Sutra, actually, is mentioned in there. So we know it goes back at least 4,000 years, but probably before recorded history.
Yeah.
Not good enough anymore. So people add additional factors, right? It's not just something something you are, a biometric, whether
Biometrics.
that is facial recognition. The Windows Hello for Business that Microsoft has rolled out is freaking awesome, and that's pretty sweet. But your phone a lot of times does that, fingerprints, etc. And then something you have, right? Possession of something.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, and so when you walk up to an ATM, you have possession of a banking card. You have knowledge then of a
PIN number.
PIN. You
Mhm.
you put those two things together, and then you have a multi-factor authentication event. You have two factors, right? And increasingly, we're seeing a fourth factor, which would be location. Um,
GOIP. Yeah.
and yeah, or as well too, transactional velocity and anomalies, etc.
Mhm.
But fingerprinting of your browsers, that's again, that's something you are, right? It's something your browser is, and so we're seeing all these different factors that work in um, to be able to continually chase this perplexing problem that we have. The bad guys keep ramping it up, and so we have to keep ramping up the defenses.
Yeah.
And we're not done yet. It's going to keep on
No.
marching on.
Well,
Yeah,
we hear about it almost a weekly basis now of a big cache or store of passwords being stolen from this company or
yeah,
this
yeah.
organization. And I usually, people immediately when they hear the news, they'll start all of my socials. I get messages on all of them. What should I do? I just bought something from Home Depot like yesterday, or I bought from this place that got hacked. I said, look, guys, it's very simple. Obviously, you put the credit locks and alerts on all your banking cards, obviously.
Hmm.
But you should personally have a rotation of your own to change your passwords so that even if there's a breach that stole a cache of passwords and accounts, that if you're changing your password, let's say every 90 days or every 6 months, even, that'll give you some assurance that, okay, the last time that my last password was an old one, I'm relatively safe. Because what
Hmm.
people need to know is that no matter how many characters, how much complexity you put in your password, you could do all the right things, but the company, through a vulnerability or an exploit or some kind of failure on their part to protect your data, gets
Hmm.
stolen anyway, and it's out of your hands. You can't control that. But what you
Right.
can control is the frequency by which you take ownership of your online security by changing your password on a very scheduled basis. So that
Hmm.
way, the
Hmm.
hackers may get that cache, but it might be two, three passwords ago, and you're good. So that's usually the
Yeah.
advice I give most people. It's just kind of got to be more positive, leaning forward of taking
Hmm.
your own online security to another level.
Hmm.
Um, but
Yeah,
let's
I
talk
usually
about.
provide. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I was
Oh,
going.
oh.
I brought a couple easy tips for people. Like I have this question all the time, right? First of all, I have at least two email accounts, right? I have the important one,
Hmm.
and I never use that on the same computer that I do my Facebooking and internet searching or whatever. That's on a secure browser, right? And so that's my financial accounts that I care a lot about. And there's the rest that I hand out, like popcorn, right? That I'll use everywhere. Um, Use a password manager, so none of my passwords are the same anywhere.
Yep.
Never, ever, ever, right? And it's super easy. I like one password. Um, I used to use LastPass, but I was not real happy with their ownership. I won't go into any details there. And I decided to make the personal decision to switch to one password. Get on the Have I Been Pwned list. Thank you, Troy Hunt, for the fabulous work you do for
Yep.
industry.
Yep.
You're a rock star. Love you, man. So have I been pwned, POWNED.com, and you
And
sign up and it tells you when your actual credentials appear on the dark web.
yep.
One password will tell you when your password shows up on the dark web, which is freaking cool. And some of the browsers were starting to do that as well
Yeah.
too.
Chrome
Um,
does that pretty good.
yeah, yeah. And the last tip I provide is great. You have a password manager, you're doing all the right things. That's great. You complex passwords. Never use the browser integration function. Your browser is dirty. You
Yeah.
talk to all kinds of websites, far more than you ever think you
Yeah.
do. You read it off the screen and you type it in, and
Yes.
it's
Do you
10
want to save
seconds.
this? No. Do not.
No.
Do not save
Do you
it.
want us to stop having you log in? No.
No.
And turn on everything you can. Turn on MFA, and where you have an important account, like I once had a brokerage that didn't have MFA. They had a really weak one. I started complaining like hardcore,
Mm.
right? And providing evidence and documentation and everything else. And they changed it eventually. I don't think it was just because of me. I think it was in their backlog and they brought it forward.
Going forward.
But yeah, you have to self-advocate in that regard and say,
Yeah.
I demand you protect me as a customer, or I'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point, because people want things to be simple and easy. And trust me, I get that. Security, the goal is to be as transparent and seamless as possible to your user experience. But when it comes to things like your bank accounts, well, what Dan's talking about, your financials, the question to ask yourself, is it worth just a little bit of inconvenience to get you that ounce of prevention for a pound of cure concept? Is it worth that little bit of convenience to say no to that cache credentials in the browser, use a password manager, and do all of those steps? Yes, it's a little inconvenient, but you don't want to be having to file police reports for identity theft. You don't want to have,
Hmm.
your credit score ruined where you got 7 years to fix it. And even worst case, have your account drained. Any or all
Oh
of them
man.
potentially drained. That's a nightmare
Hmm.
scenario that no one wants to
It
have.
is. It is. And I talked to tech savvy people that got compromised. It was a SIM swap attack on their
Mm,
phone.
mm.
And their first indication was they were like, "Oh, that's funny. I don't have any bars. I should have bars. Like I'm in Philadelphia and I should be having like why am I getting no signal?" And it's because they had no service at all, and it was because their phone had been turned off because it had been switched, and they were 6 months as a very technical person, 6 months recovering from that, and they lost thousands of dollars. I mean, it was horrible. So
So
yeah, that extra 10 seconds, spend it.
spend it.
Well worth it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
So
yeah.
another topic, Dan, that you note in your bio on LinkedIn, and folks, I'm gonna also have the links that we talked about, the I've been pwned, and all of those links are going to be in the description below because Dan's going to get them to me. So don't pause the video and start your Google tabs and searches yet. It's just a click away in the description below. So rest assured, we're going to take care of you with those links. Another topic that Dan that you're very passionate about and have a lot of knowledge in, and this is one that's near and dear to me as well, is defense in depth. And we hear this term
Hmm.
thrown out a lot. Cyber professionals, if any of you watching this, you probably hear it all the time when people want, especially when people start finding vulnerabilities or security controls that aren't implemented, and they'll start coming up with this, well, we have this, and this, so we have defense in depth. And they really don't understand what they're talking about because this word gets thrown around a lot. And so, what I'd like Dan for you to do is kind of one, explain truly what defense in depth is, right? And then we'll go
Right.
from there and kind of dive a little deeper under the surface to kind of give people that perspective of
Hmm.
what's really going on. So take it away, Dan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we can think about, I like to talk about real world examples, right? We have familiarity with, and most of us have experience perhaps in person or certainly in literature and television or whatnot, Game of Thrones. You've seen castles, right? And these castles have multiple layers of defense. There's a clear cut area around it where you can see the enemy approaching. Typically, you force them to walk uphill. There's a moat they have to get through. You can raise the drawbridge, right? I can't remember what they're called, but there are holes that you can shoot crossbow bolts or arrows
Like a
through.
turret
Uh,
or,
no, but they're
or
basically slots, right?
slots.
That they
Okay.
can duck behind, they can pop out, take a shot,
Yeah.
duck back, and those are built in. You actually have the architecture, especially if you go to forts in the age of Cannon. They have a very different architecture than those built during medieval siege. That's built into the architecture. But the king isn't out walking in the courtyard during a battle, right? You and most of them, you break down the first gate. You can think about Lord of the Rings when they went to Helm's Deep,
Helm's
and they
Deep.
got into the first one, and a lot of them would basically force the soldiers to march to their left, because marching to their left, if they're right-handed, that meant their shield was off the side. They're either forcing to walk backwards, or you're going to expose them without their shield. This is like thinking through architecture, right? To get to that next layer and that next gate and the next things, they're pouring hot oil on them, right? And all
Yeah.
these kind of things. You can think about
Even
these
the
siege
steps,
defenses.
the spiral
The
steps,
steps, right?
they
The
can't
king
use their
is
right
again
hand.
behind multiple layers, right? And there's usually a hidey hole, like a little secret tunnel they can pop out and and save the day in case everything else fails.
Yep.
I got the secret key, man, and right, I can like go down the steps and there's out of the woods. And you can think about your own organization many times is like that. You definitely have defense in depth. Like, do you know who you're talking to? You have authentication and what processes are behind that, right? You have firewalls established. You're looking for anomalies that show up in the traffic that you have. And then you have isolation of your internet facing applications from the rest of the organization. You should have Bastion hosts set up in that way. And then, you have isolation of your databases. You should have lockdown accounts where your authentication that's happening between excuse me, your applications and your database are unique to each application, and they're very prescribed in what rights you give them. You have step-up authentication aspects. You have privileged access management. All sorts of these are all defense in depth layers. I want to say it was Code Red was an early example where there were lots of vulnerable computers that got hit, right? Because it was a massive attack back in the early 2000s. But not all the computers that were exposed that actually had an attack happen actually were compromised. You're like, huh, that's odd. Kind of like, like you have the super spreader event, some people get sick, some people don't. Like, well, why? And it was the sequence in which you installed packages. If you went ABC, you were good. You went BCA, you're hosed. And it was just this weird layering of how things got laid into the system that created immunity. So
Hmm.
even the sequence of these steps is important. That was a fairly random one. Nobody even saw that one happening. But we learn from prior attacks and we change our defenses because of those. And then we have this defense in depth process where we can say, okay, well, that's not good anymore, right? In the age of canon, it's no longer good having just a concrete wall because the cannons blast right through it. We need to change what we're doing, right? And the age of armor and knights ended with the invention of the crossbow, because the crossbow would go right through the armor.
Yep.
Suddenly, plate armor is not defending you any longer. So, like, okay, all our knights are dying. Why? okay, well, that's not good anymore. Let's change our strategy. Um, and you had the same kind of thing happening in, thank you for your service, sir, U.S. Army, I believe.
Oh
Um,
no, no, I've never been in the service, but I've supported
okay,
soldiers for
you
most of
sort,
my career.
but I'm sure you've heard of information warfare, which is what they call information security
Mhm.
inside the military, and it's that same exact thing. You're at warfare about information, command and control networks, and mission, and it is warfare. And if you think your organization isn't at war right now, you probably are.
Of course. I mean,
And
there's
it's
so many
yeah,
threat maps that people can, like Norse has one, Norse IP.
yeah,
There's a couple others where people can see, and that's like, I think it's like less than 3 or 1% of attacks being represented in those visuals where you'll see all the different types of attacks, what ports they're attacking on, what countries these attacks are
yeah,
coming from. And it's just like a small little cup of tea of the ocean of data that they're
right,
processing.
right.
It's gargantuan. So,
Hmm.
one of the papers that I've been speaking on, Dan, since about 2016, 2015 is one called Beyond the CIA Triad. And a lot of cyber professionals out there, including people looking into getting into cyber and doing some early studying, you're going to hear about this beautiful thing that is a kind of a foundational, it's a foundation of almost every security framework out there, and it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But in my paper, Beyond the CIA Triad, I speak to the other 9 security principles that most people heard of a few of them because we talk about them. We talk about them in RMF, we talk about them in cybersecurity framework, SOC 2, PCI DSS. We talk about these things like we just talked about MFA, authentication, right?
Hmm.
Authentication is a principle, right? We talk about in the military,
Absolutely.
there's obviously authorized use or working for a company that got to vet you and you get federated in the system. Then you get authorized to use the system, to use networks and
Hmm.
systems. So there's authorized use, there's privacy because we talk about PII or PHI. So we have privacy as a control, and then we have oh goodness, my brain's going to draw a blank. Utility, which is a little bit different from availability, and as I explained it
Oh
to
yeah.
people, you
Can you
know,
use it? Right.
yes. So the battery of your
Hmm.
phone, because most of our phones we depend on it every day, but usually we got a car charger, an office charger, a battery pack, you name it, that we always have to keep the phone charged. The charge on the phone powers the phone. That's the availability for the phone to be powered on. So power is the availability, but the instruments that provide the power is utility, your chargers, your backup batteries. So for a data center, it would be generators, UPS units. Those are the utilities that support the availability of those services that are running on the device. So utility is
Hmm.
really important. And then the last one is, possession. So I love to talk about possession because this security principle, every data breach that anyone's ever read about in the past and happens today is due to possession. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of other avenues that causes the ultimate breach, like confidentiality issues, integrity issues in the vulnerability management program, 0 days exploits, the whole shebang contributes to it. But the ultimate goal is data exfil. So a data breach means someone got in and they took something out. They lost positive possession of their data. And of course, the hottest, the hot tool that people usually gravitate towards to prevent this, even to include insider threat, is data loss prevention, DLP. But most industry people know it's at best an 80 to 90% solution, depending on how it's implemented and how tight they lock down that service on across their network. But I usually talk to people about the 9 security principles in this presentation, and it directly correlates to defense in depth because if people are working with just the 3 principles and they're looking at their policies and their plans and their programs with the lens of this 3, not realizing there's another 6 that they should be aware of that has different,
Right.
what I call agendas. Each security principle has its own priority and agenda of how it's protecting your network. And of
Hmm.
course, as Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, thousands of years ago, he said, if to protect on all sides is to be weak on all sides. And he had a very important thing to that because every battle, just like companies and corporations, they have
Hmm.
limited budgets, limited personnel, limited tools and resources. So you have to kind
Hmm.
of position these strategically to protect your data and your crown jewels of your business appropriately, right? And adequately would be the word I
Right.
would use. So that's where defense def comes in, is that the kind of positioning and that strategy. So Dan, could you maybe elaborate on maybe some recent cases that you might have advised on where people have had an exploit, maybe not name names due to confidentiality reasons, but
Right.
maybe describe where even it could be the simplest thing to one thing leads to another, and leads to like a pivot attack of this and that. I know there's probably
Right.
countless stories, but could you share a couple with us?
Sure, sure. And almost always it is exactly as you have said, where one thing leads to another, like the song. Um, And I think it's funny you hit on CIA. A funny little backstory, and I don't know the guy's name, but apparently, just like Lincoln sketched out the Lincoln address on the back of an envelope and created genius in moments. Apparently, the guy who first talked about the triad of CIA basically sketched it out moments before going on stage and then talked about it. And
Was that
suddenly,
Don
but
Parker?
but it might have been, yeah. But I
Don
mean,
Parker,
and
because he's did the Hexadad.
I'm not dissing the dude. I mean, sometimes the muse is sitting on your shoulder and you give gold, right?
Yeah.
But something is really important. A pet peeve of mine is that because the majority of spending in information security comes out of the military and financials, and where confidentiality is paramount, people have convinced themselves that confidentiality is the most important one of the triad. And you can imagine a surgeon coming out. Well, Mrs. Jones, the good news is we were able to save your husband's leg, but be assured that at no point was their data violated in accordance with HIPAA. But we did actually take off the wrong leg first, but we got the right one later. So it's okay. Data integrity wasn't as important as confidentiality. Their privacy has been secured and everything's fine there. You don't have to worry. Their data is perfectly confidential, but they are missing an extra leg.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and so the notion that you can say, well, this is always more important than that, because the real answer is the consulting answer. It depends. Um, but sorry, back to your question
Yeah.
of the cascade. And I have been involved in a few incidents myself doing incident response, and it's always a cascade. It's never the one thing, right? There are some silver bullets where a single packet, right? It's like the hole in one in golf. It's the same kind of thing that people look for that, but it usually doesn't happen that way. Usually it's something really stupid, and I'll point to one that was actually published, and it's always quite useful. Um, and it was published in the New York Times. JP Morgan Chase at the time was one of the largest breaches that happened. Now, I happened to be there at the time, but I'm only going to talk about what the New York Times talked about. Um, and I'm not going to violate NDA in any respect. I don't have to because the New York Times apparently somebody talked to them,
Okay.
and somebody was stupid enough to say, "Hey, somebody leaked," which is a way of saying they got the story right. Um, so that was something really interesting where one of the most common folks to violate security policies regarding secure credentials and appropriate ways of dealing with federation, et cetera, is HR. HR loves to partner with third parties to provide this little nuance and this little thing, right? This survey or a feature or whatever. And they get these little, organizations. Some of them are what I call 3 Moog. That's 3 months out of garage. Like they're barely stood up, right? And just log in, right? And they had done that with a third party website and asked employees to set up accounts. They got breached. This third party, they got posted on the dark web. The Russians picked it up. Apparently, started mining the information and started hitting the borders of JPMC and found out that they had a server that was externally facing. I believe it was an SSH server that was on the internet, and it wasn't supposed to be. Right? Policy said it shouldn't be there. It was,
Yeah.
and they started hitting that up with credentials, and hey, they got a login. So somebody had used the same exact password that they had as their network password that would get them on the network out of this third-party HR site. Stupid problem, violation of policy, and bad guys got in, and now they're on the network. And then they do some exploits. They find some weaknesses. They escalate privilege. They make some lateral movement to other areas, and um, they found actually, I think ironically, it was a security system. Might have been the backup server or patching server.
Hmm.
Maybe it was their vulnerability scanner. But those things have admin,
Yep.
and they had admin across the entire server space, all of it, right? And so, looting and pillaging going on because they had the golden key.
Yep.
And you can talk about back to defense in depth, right? Whoever thought it was a great idea for people to use their core network credentials for the secrets of the organization and put that out on the internet and type that on untrusted devices in hotel kiosks? Bad idea, right? And you had servers facing the internet that shouldn't have been. And apparently you didn't know because you let that persist. And you allowed employees to replicate their passwords externally. You allowed them to choose their own passwords with external partners instead of federating,
Mm,
right? You can see all these cascade failures in control systems. And they knew about an enclave. We all as security professionals know about an enclave. You say, we're going to put the crown jewels, we're going to have that segregated. RSA got a tough lesson many years ago. They
mhm.
actually had keys, right, from the Secure ID. Secure ID, fabulous system. Ironically enough, JP Morgan Chase is the one who actually, that was a project that was done back in the day, I think by Bank one of their subsidiaries they acquired and created the Secure ID system. And RSA did not have those air gapped, and they had keys on their corporate network that were available. They
Mm.
literally had allegedly PLA. We don't know if they were actual Chinese military operatives, but they did have bad guys in the woods bouncing laser beams off the glass, listening to conversations and getting access. And they used then to hack into defense contractors. I don't remember at this time specifically, but the big boys like Boeing and MITRE and all the rest, right?
Yeah.
Hughes and all the rest of the defense industrial base. And those are the guys that found out, like, going, hey, we're seeing a lot of weird logins and
Yeah.
what's going on? And it's because security had been compromised, right?
Yep.
And so these are all these kind of things are failures in that defense in depth. And then the bad guys are able to then blow past those defenses because there's a back door,
Yeah.
right? And that's part of the problem. And I talk about having a padlock on a tent.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I think there's a lot of confusion that, I do MFA, my work is done, and I don't have to do anything
Yeah.
else here. Yeah. So with a lock on a tent, you got to look at, applying a control in a place where it doesn't actually achieve the desired effect. You can look at the front door, you got guards, guns, locks, walls, you're right. Mean, angry guard dogs barking at you, but the smokers are propping the back door open. Everybody knows, right? And it gets you right inside. So you do have to, like I say, do a walkabout, right? Look at your organization from all sides and look,
Mhm.
and that's a very important thing. And one of the things that caused the issue with a lot of organizations is they had internet facing resources they didn't realize they did.
Mhm.
And the bad guys found those and exploited those. And there you go.
It
Did I
brings a
answer your
good,
question?
yeah. It brings up a good point where a lot of folks, when we think, talk about having like penetration testers come and run audits and checks against your network, and both from a what I call an outside and inside view, right? And of course, you hear the terms for those that are studying for these exams, you hear the terms of like black box, gray box, white box testing, levels of knowledge that they have of your network when they run these tests. But there's also the concept of where your own SOC teams, your IT department teams, and so forth. MITRE has this wonderful tool that they put out on the internet for everyone to use called the MITRE Attack framework, and they have lots of training on their website. I'm a big fan of that program
Hmm.
from MITRE,
Me
and
too.
it kind
Yeah.
of gives you that how are they going to get in kind of scenarios. And then there's another site called Attack IQ Academy where you can get free training on the concept of purple teaming, but how to leverage MITRE Attack framework to build scenarios. Then, when people hear the term running tabletop exercises, unless you have a really creative people on your
So
teams,
important. Yeah.
they're only limited by their imagination. But when you leverage a
Yeah.
tool like MITRE Attack Framework, you're getting real life things seen in the wild by all of these organizations that are
Hmm.
collaborating and sharing information for the Centers of Threat
Hmm.
Informed Defense are feeding this tool with the exploits, the tactics, and techniques. So I implore anybody out there to get familiar with MITRE Attack Framework. Go to Attack IQ Academy. You get free training, free CPEs, digital badges from Credly. It's a triple win, and it's free. Did I say it's free? And
Free, triple free.
triple
Well, and
free.
I'm always a fan of free CPEs. I serving on the ISU2 board, I did have a lot of members who apparently had bought into the notion that if they didn't get on an airplane, they couldn't call it a CPE,
Hmm.
right? Like I can't find CPEs, and I couldn't think, really? So I started. You can't say that out loud, but you're thinking, you're like, really? You can't find them? So I started posting out on now X, then Twitter, hashtag CPE for free. And I stopped when I got to around, I think, 45,000 CPEs that I
I
posted.
mean, my
Um,
goodness.
there's just so much. Like you look out on YouTube, right? Did you know you can watch YouTube videos, much like this one, for a CPE?
Yep.
Like and go out
Hour
to
of
I
training,
love
instruction.
I love I love Iron Geek. Go to irongeek.com, who's recorded years and years and years of conferences. So you can go out and like, hey, I'm gonna see what they talked about at the 2013 DerbyCon.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna see like 40 sessions. That's 40 CPEs, right? So still look for it. I did that for 3 years and like did a carpet bombing. Probably a good three-fourths of the links still work. Hashtag CPE for free. Check it out. And there's lots of ways to get CPEs, especially ISSA, ISACA, ISC squared, Tool, which is Locksport, OWASP, CAS, sorry, CSA, Cloud Security Alliance. All of them have chapters. Attend a chapter meeting. I attended one yesterday. It was awesome. Local Nashville ISSA chapter. Um, Great session, hour and a half. So I got 1.5 CPEs and
Wonderful.
lunch. Yeah.
And then you just, when you join a local chapter, you're also connecting to the human network
Oh
that's going to be
yeah.
pivotal to your career. We could talk about data networks,
Yes.
infrastructure networks all day, but the network that's going to serve you throughout the rest of your life is that human network, who you meet at these events. They're oftentimes they're working in different industries that are either opposite of
Oh
yours,
yeah.
adjacent to yours, but the perspectives and knowledge and insights that they bring to these meetings are invaluable because you'll make
Right.
connections with people that
Right.
you might be in a tough corner with a
Hmm.
situation, and you could be just a
Hmm.
call away going, "Hey, Bob, we met at that luncheon the other day and that lunch and learn session, and
Right.
hey, I'd just like to pick your
Hmm.
brain about something. I have a challenge I'm working with."
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
wonderful thing to
Absolutely.
have that sense of community that you can immediately inject yourself into. And again, connect with people, network, share perspectives and ideas, and see some great, insightful presentations. And like I said, oftentimes they're lunch and learn. So you get to have a meal and have that social aspect to your career.
Right.
It's huge.
Hmm.
So don't kind of sleep on the fact that when you do your certifications, that there's an opportunity
Hmm.
for you to join a local chapter. So please
Right.
take advantage of every
Hmm.
benefit of your membership. So I want to go
Right.
back to the
Lean
CPE
in.
trains,
Yeah.
the continuing professional education credits, and some certification authorities will call them by like a different name, like they'll call it a EDU, PDU,
CLEs or whatever.
professional
Yeah. Yeah.
development unit, whatever the acronym they use, but essentially it's all for the same thing. Most will accept, like what Dan was saying, watching a YouTube video, but be sure for your respective cert to read their guidelines on their continuing education policy to make sure you're adhering to their policy. But I will say, as IAC Square, as I said earlier, is one of the most reputable and top world recognized certification providers, that they have a very I don't want to use the word flexible. They have a very open policy that they'll take almost anything as long as you can substantiate the proof that you did indeed take that training. Other than that, they'll accept
Hmm.
Dan
Hmm.
saying, watching YouTube videos on security topics, cybersecurity
Right.
events.
So this brings up the funnest thing you can do for CPEs,
Okay.
right? Because physical security is part of the CISSP.
Yes.
Firearms training counts. So
Ah,
I did a defensive shotgun class a few weeks back. Had a hell of a lot of fun at the range, and learned a lot about using my shotgun appropriately in low light situations, et cetera, and everything else. And it was 5 CPEs. Whoop, yeah.
five CPEs for a shotgun.
Oh yeah,
I
free
challenge
shotgun
anyone
class.
watching this that's an EC Council member, GIAC member, SANS, any of the other certification providers. Will they accept firearms training as
Right,
CPEs?
right.
I
Because
challenge
I'm
you.
in.
And if
Yeah.
you find out it's right, paste the information in the
Mhm.
comments below. I'd love to read about it. But man,
Yeah.
ISC Square takes firearms training. Wow, way
Right.
to go,
It's
ISC
physical
Square.
security, right?
It
And
is.
I'm an NRA instructor, so I teach pistol, right? And yeah, so my entire instruction that I had for NRA, I was able to completely tie that in to
Wow.
either Class B for how to teach, or those are
Yes.
Class B credits, or Class A credits for physical security. And yeah, it works.
Wonderful. So,
Yeah.
well, Dan, I know we could talk for forever on different security topics, but I do want to pick your brain on some certifications since we just talked about the different CPEs certification authorities. For
Yeah.
someone watching this going, "Hey, Dan, you're level 99. You're at the top of the field. I'm here at the lowly valley trying to get a pitchfork to work my way into cyber." What would be the guidance you would give someone to going on the path? Let's just pick the path to CISO. If you had to say, "Hey, Step one, step two, step three, and they can be at varying degrees of a career, but what would be like three certs on the path to being a CISO?
Boy, and I don't, you know, you can't get there just with certs, right? There's a lot that has to go into that. And it's important that you recognize what a certification is, right? I think that lawyers got it best with passing the bar. You can think about a high jumper. And if the bar is set to 2.5 meters and you jump 4.5, doesn't matter, right? But if you jump 2.4, you didn't pass the bar. You knocked it off the stand.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to think about it is what they call the person who graduates last in their medical class is doctor,
School doctor.
right? Exactly. And so it's just that added credential on top of everything else you're bringing to the table, your communication skills and interpersonal skills, and the experience that you've had on the job, and the education that you're bringing to the table, and everything else that defines you. And you're adding to that. Oh, and by the way, I can actually demonstrate that I have that knowledge because here's my transcript. I have a diploma from this university, and I can demonstrate that I had this knowledge in this field because I have a CPA, I have a CISSP, I have a CFE, I have a whatever it is, right? A PMP if you're a project
Mhm.
manager. And I think it's important to keep that grounded, like what it actually gives you. Because I think people sometimes get that a little off. I think that there are some important stepping stones in a career. So if you're just getting started, what I carry in the back of my phone, because I've helped so many taxi cab drivers and Uber drivers with the 1 million CC, because it comes up in conversation. I give them the link right there. It's right
Yep.
there, baby.
Yeah.
Um, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. I'm gonna put a pin in that. I'll come right back to it, right? But if you're just getting started, the CC is a fabulous place to start. Certified in cybersecurity, and it's designed for getting into the field. You have to find some way in. And there are so many paths in, right? If
Yes.
you try to define what university degrees don't lead to cybersecurity, and I can only think of like three, and it's performance arts, right? Like if you're majoring in trombone or painting,
Can you not
right?
interpretive dance a problem away?
Yeah, I don't think so. Animal husbandry, right? If and agriculture are about the only three that I cannot reasonably tie into cybersecurity. Chemistry, oh hells yes,
Yeah.
because you can use that for forensics, and
Mhm.
forensics leads you directly into investigations and physical evidence and everything else, and you can work for a police department and help them out with their investigations, which is part of their field, right? So yeah, there's so many paths in, but there is this essential bit of knowledge you have to be able to demonstrate. If you're targeting a CISO to be leading the security charge for an organization and being responsible for the information security aspects of that mission, there are some things you do have to understand, and the CC I think is an excellent starting point. You mentioned another one, Security Plus. I have a lot of respect for Security Plus. I have a Security Plus. Um, it's a great start. It's more technical, hands-on, where CC is more conceptual and gets
Yes.
into risk
More
management
foundation.
concepts and whatnot. It is, and it's a little broader in that respect, which will help you across a larger number of projects and engagements. But not knocking Security Plus. It is a very important certificate for a very big chunk of of our profession.
Mhm.
And then I would say another important certification would probably be, um, it depends on where you're going into the CCSP. If you're going into cloud, that's the cloud cybersecurity professional, very important. If you're going into software development, the CSSLP, which is all about the software development lifecycle,
Cycle.
which also includes procurement and third party, right? And the rest of that supply chain management and all of that is covered in the CSSLP. Um, and then there are some more advanced certifications to look at, like the CISSP. I would also point out to the CISM or the CISA, very important certification. CISA being the Certified Information Systems Auditor,
Mhm.
a foundational program that helps you understand what it is the auditors are looking at, right? And how do you audit a system? How do you know it actually works? Um, and by the way, the creator of information systems audit is Bill Murray. He's been credited by that by ISACA, and he's one of the founders of ISC2 and one of my mentors. Fabulous gentleman. Not the Bill Murray that was in Groundhog Day.
Different,
Uh,
different one.
just
Not
happens to have
related.
the same name. This is the Bill Murray that was the father of information systems audit and helped launch RACF,
Uh-huh.
which is just incredibly influential in cybersecurity. And love the man. He's there in Connecticut. If you're watching this, hello, Bill. And you know, the that's really important, understanding audit and CISM management. That's about the certified information security manager, and understanding how to actually manage systems. And that's where you're starting to get into actually the management aspect of the leadership as the CISO. CISO, so people understand, is a bit unusual because it is a staff function. Um, and it is there to advise the board of directors. How should they think about security? Are they doing the right things? Are they making the right investments? Are they actually being able to support the mission and demonstrate fiduciary due care? It's not necessarily a line function, and you with your military affiliation understand the difference between line and staff.
Hmm.
And so, but many times, you know, an organization gets hacked because the board didn't listen or chose different investments. And the bad guys don't care if you funded that 3 years from now.
Yeah.
Um, you get hacked, and then the CISO gets axed. Like it's a tough role. You
Yeah.
have to be ready for that. Like you're going to be the fall guy or girl, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Unfortunately. Um, so it can be a pretty tough job. I talked to a lot of professionals, and a lot of senior leaders to say, you know, I don't think I want that. Or they do it for a while and decide something different. Um, you have to understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Did I answer your question? I felt
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah, you
talked a lot
did.
around it. Yeah. Okay.
And I have another question too, because you mentioned Bill Murray. I think another gentleman you mentioned. Along your long career, this had to been like different people in the industry that motivated, inspired you, maybe even mentored you, provided guidance on your career. Do you have any that you'd like to pay homage to?
Oh, wow. I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Isaac
So many
Newton.
in that,
Love that quote.
so many, so many in that chorus of thousands that have helped me on my career. Um, so I would say Jim Wade. Unfortunately, he was one of the founders of ISC2. He's the one who actually proctored my SSCP exam and founded the Columbus, Ohio ISSA chapter. And he unfortunately got lung cancer, is no longer with us. And the ISC2 has the Jim Wade Service Award, recognizing the years and years of service that he gave. He went before me and opened the pathway and made it easy for me and mentored me and counseled me along the way, as did Harry DeMeo, who was on the board of ISC2 at the time,
Mhm.
and a wonderful man. Bill Murray, I've already mentioned. He taught me how to think more deeply about ethics, and I continue to serve on the ISC2 ethics committee. And we're one of the few authorities in the world in our profession that actually hears ethics cases about our profession. And it's a very important thing that we have to do. He taught me how to think about that. Jack Jones, who was the inventor of FAIR, which is quantified risk analysis. I was very fortunate on my formative years in security when I was at Nationwide. He was our CISO, and he mentored me. We worked together on a number of things. I helped him with as did many others with the very early aspects of FAIR, what worked, what didn't, and he took this and created gold. Thereafter, I can take no credit for what he did. Um, he thinks more deeply about risk than anybody I've ever talked to. Um, but the number two, and that would be Alex Hutton, who I worked with, and he actually worked on FAIR for a while and worked on the Verizon data breach report for a number of years, and now is working in financial industry as a CISO. Alex did, and he and I joked that we mentored each other, and we did, and he taught me to think differently about risk. And I actually posted this on LinkedIn this last week. We had a conversation a few years ago at RSA. It's been about 6 years, and he talked about Jiro Dreams of Sushi
Ah,
as a fabulous documentary. You've have you seen that? Right?
yes.
Beautiful story about this 90-plus-year-old man uh, who who is still seeking the perfect sushi. Oh, he served Obama, he served kings, right? And in this tiny little restaurant in the subway system of
Yes.
Japan, he has 14 seats, I think. It's this tiny little, but he is serving some of the finest sushi in the world.
I believe he's
The
Michelin
first sushi
starred.
establishment.
Yeah.
He was the very first sushi restaurant to earn 3 Michelin stars. He is no longer listed because the whole idea of Michelin stars, created by the Michelin Tire Company, places you would go out of your way to visit, like you would create a trip to go. It's impossible to go there anymore. So they dropped it off the list because you can't. I tried this last year to go in. You just can't. I mean, the list is a mile long, and he's just. But the aspect of it is not thinking about great food. The aspect is somebody who is honing their craft over a period of decades in the pursuit of excellence and never done. You talked about this earlier. You got the fire in your belly, and that's the secret of being successful with cybersecurity is getting the fire in your belly, right?
Yes.
And that was a beautiful thing that Alex was able to tie that together. And we're like, oh, light bulb. So you can pause this if you need to, but I encourage you to go off and watch Jiro Dreams of Sushi, the documentary, and come back and think about his approach to his craft and how you might consider your craft.
Wonderful. I love that. And we'll include a link to the synopsis and the IMDb links for that documentary in the description below. Excuse me there. Dan, this is my favorite question I like to ask all my guests. So, if we were able to get into a time machine and go back in time to a young Dan on day one when he made a decision that cyber IT is the path he wants to take his life and career into, could you share us what that story is?
Well, what I want to say is about 9 years from now, there'll be this thing called Bitcoin. Buy the hell out of it. But and actually, my wife had a discussion. It was trading at 80 cents. Bitcoin was at 80 cents, and I said, "Honey, we should cash $1,000 out of our IRA and buy that." She said, "You might as well set that on fire."
You'll
And
hate
we
my
did.
story then. Two
Oh,
guys.
okay.
So two guys. So I'm a multi-domain expert, and one of my expertise is in cryptography. So two of my
Hmm,
colleagues reached out to me. One that worked
mine
at the
too.
agency,
Yeah.
that still works at the agency. He reached out to me and he says, "Hey Jim, what do you think about this Bitcoin stuff?" At the time, it was between I think 26 and 27 cents a coin. And they're like, "We're just going to throw 1,000 each at it. Do you want to throw something at it? Should we throw more? What do you?" I said, "Man, I guess you're gonna throw 1,000 at it. That's probably what you spend in a weekend in Vegas. Sure, why not? But I don't think banks are gonna recognize it or take it." And that was my position at that time, which I think a majority of the world was on that position. But for the
That was a
folks that took
rational
the risk,
position at the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, they each bought 1,000 of it at that price, and one of the two continued to buy more, but one of them went off grid. As soon as he hit about 50 plus million, he is no longer on any social
Yeah.
unreachable. He disappeared, and I
Yeah.
wish him well. If he ever watches this, hey, you did the right
Yeah.
decision. You didn't listen to me.
Right.
So,
Yeah, we saw I don't follow which model's which, but this is the pimped out model, right? A Tesla, and the one that has the glass continually over the top of it, which
oh
is
yeah.
beautiful. And pulled up to a light beside me, slightly ahead, and I could see the license plate said 2 BTC. And I took a picture, sent it to my wife, and said, "Hey, look, they're selling Teslas now for $1.60 because you know what? At 80 cents,
Yeah,
that'd been two
that's what it
Bitcoin."
was.
Yeah. We're
So,
not bitter. You can't be bitter about that. I'm sorry. I got down into a deep rabbit hole and completely
oh no,
forgot
no,
your
it's a
questions.
fun
Oh,
sidestep.
what would I advise myself? Yeah. So I kind of
Well,
have to
the
start with
question is, what is the story when you made the decision to say, "Hey, I'm going
made
to
the
do IT
decision.
cyber"? Yeah.
All right. So I kind of have to talk about the origin story at this point.
Yes.
Like we're a Marvel or DC universe. What's the
Yes.
origin story? And it was I actually was a business major and got into programming. I started out in restaurant management. Boy, did that was that horrible. And it's just a lot of hours, a lot of stainless steel. Nobody showed up for work. Hard way to make a living. 90 to 100 hours a week. Just rough, right? And I'm making less than minimum wage actually. And so but I by training, I've had a business systems degree, had a lot of systems and programming, and I'd been programming since I was 15. Did some professional programming when I was 16. Actually, created a database systems and sold them. And so I said, I'm going to go out. I'm going to actually become a developer. I did. And fast forward a few years, I'm working as a consultant at Bank One, And my company said, well, you don't have a comp sci degree, so it's hard to sell your services. You need to get some certifications. Okay. What should I get? So I got the ICCP. I got their certified computing professional, and then they said that's great. Get another one. I got a certified data processor, and they said that's great. Get another one. I got the certified systems professional, and each of those had specialties. I started running out of specialties because I had already gotten the database systems, and I got the programming, I got the information security or the information systems management, and the last one I chose was security, and as one of my specialties, and then the other one I chose was end user. I don't remember exactly the term for it. End user computing, essentially, right? Ergonomics and designing good interfaces, everything like that, which I've used only very occasionally. But I fell in love with security. Like I was studying, especially like cryptography and emanations, and how to basically do compromises based on sniffing off of copper wires, because the water pipe ran too close to the printer and all that kind of stuff. And like, oh man, I just fell in love. I was like, I was like, I could do this for the rest of my life and not get paid to be happy.
I love
Um,
it.
yeah, and so I got that certification, and then fast forward a few years, I'm working. I decided to go from developer. I was running, doing information systems, running data center stuff, and network ops and that kind of thing, because I was doing client server development. Nobody's focused on the slash, which was the slash between client and server. How did the two things connect? Well, I got deep into networking, and I'm in a small company, BMW Financial at the time. I think we had like 120 employees. We're doing the financials for all the BMW in North America. And my boss is talking to the developer manager. Said, man, we have the security stuff. I wish you had somebody who's security. I'm like, actually, I'm certified in that.
Hello. Ah,
He's like, you are? Like, well, yeah, what do you need? Like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I can help you with that. And I went to my boss later and said, look, any more of the security stuff you have? Can I do that? Because that's fun. And so for the next 2 years, everything security related, I was doing, and I was just like happy as a pig in mud. Fabulous. And I had this moment, this belly button moment that I call the contemplation of your place in the universe with a very Zen-like kind of perspective. Where do I fit in? I do this every 5 years. I said, like, man, I could go like deep in the networking with, uh, ARP and how to talk to routers and just hug network all the rest of my life and get deep into protocols. I could go to DBA. I was a DBA at the time. I could like really get deep into being a DBA, and I was already doing like database normalization, everything else like that.
mhm,
Or the security thing, like going, oh, security thing's kind of cool. I did a security thing. It was 2000, really good time to get into security.
mhm.
And I
That's the
got my first
Y2K.
time,
Yeah.
exactly, got my first job. I was actually Y2K manager from BMW Financial, and got that done. And then got into security full time at Nationwide, and loved it, and been it ever since. 25 years now.
Excellent.
And it's been a hell of a good journey. So what I would counsel an early Dan, um, I had somebody give me some bad advice for a while, and it wasn't horrible, but I didn't recognize the end of it. And they said, stay technical, don't ever get into management,
Mm.
because you get out, you lose the technical edge, and you'll never be able to go back. And stay in the technical as long as you can. And I realized a few years back that was actually, it was good to a point,
Hmm.
right? And I went past that point, and it's like, okay. And I actually got a little nervous. I stopped programming for a while and was started doing architecture and whatnot. And touched a good job managing the entire single sign-on and federation systems of Nationwide. Was like, I don't know, 168 servers running. We were at 99.9949, which I was really proud of that number. That's really rocking good on
Hmm.
distributed computing. And ran that for a while, just because I was like, man, I haven't been a command line for a while. I got to get back into Unix, right? I got to like Linux and get hardcore with it, right?
Yeah.
I did that, and I'm like, okay, okay, okay. But I had to get comfortable with my tools are PowerPoint and Outlook and Word and Excel, and
Yeah.
those are my tools. Those are the weapons that are in my arsenal, right? And that was an uncomfortable place from somebody who came from development. I was like a hardcore developer, right? and I had to get comfortable with that in my journey. And I think what I would have come to an early Dan was said, this is fine for now, but 5 to 7 years from now, you need to flip and get into management. And I did that very intentionally 6 years ago. I took my first manager role. I'd been doing leadership for a long time, enterprise security architect, and you're doing leadership with no authority. And I'd done that for 15 years. And I got then into actual management, and I delayed that too long. But I had a hell of a good ride. I mean, I've done a lot of really cool stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's been just bliss, man. I look back at my career, haven't done everything right. Oh, hell's no. No, no.
Yeah.
That's how you learn the scars, right?
Yeah.
How your kid learns to walk is by falling down a lot,
Yeah.
right? And that's how I learned. I made lots of mistakes along the way. But man,
Just to kind of pause for a minute there, you can see the joy in Dan's face, right? When you kind of find your purpose and the thing that excites you to get out of bed in the morning.
oh
Because
yeah,
most people's jobs, I know people that are CPAs, miserable. People that are lawyers, miserable. And how unfortunate it is to dedicate an investment of time and money and energy into a profession just to wake up every day just being unhappy and disappointed to go to the office.
right, right,
Where look at the enthusiasm that Dan's showing here is priceless
right.
when you find that
Oh
purpose.
man, yeah. And tangentially, I'm also a hardcore motorcyclist too, and I ride like 11 months out of the year, and I was recently in I only recently moved to Tennessee, but I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and 11 months out of the year is, and you're getting some cold weather, and I was working at L Brands, the parent company, Victoria's Secret, Bath Body Works, La Senza, and talking with a colleague, and she's like, "Oh, I feel so sorry for these guys. I see them riding a motorcycle when it's 50 degrees." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? When's the last time you said yeehaw on your commute?" I said, "The only thing that can make my commute more awesome would be machine gun and a grizzly bear." I mean, it's like I'm having a ball, right? And that's what my journey has been with cybersecurity. I was really fortunate nationwide, got into Federation, and I got to be on the team that was the first in the world to do SAML in the real world,
Mm.
right? We're
Okay.
getting alpha code cuts from
Yeah.
RSA on their early clear trust. We're like literally like week on, week out, we're getting early code cuts.
Uh-huh.
And I called a friend of mine, Brian Mueller, who was working for Ohio State at the time. He's now at Walmart. Hell of a good guy. And this was like 2001. We are early, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah.
August. And that day, we had done the very first real world SAML Federation, or we actually did a login to third party with a service provider. And 45 minutes later, we did the first three-way where we went from us to the third party, and then they did a redirector back to us to somebody else. And we actually did it. And
Nice.
this is like August. This is less like, I already said like August 25, 2000 was when I got my CISSP. This is literally like 1 year later,
Yeah.
right? And I called my friend up and said, dude, I can't tell you what we did, but I feel like freaking Oppenheimer, man. This is the coolest thing. And in January, I'm going to tell you what I just did, but I can't tell you, but oh, man, this is cool.
Just remember this day.
It was awesome, right? And then like we actually went live January 6th, I think it was 2002. We actually launched a three-way federation with us as identity provider and two service providers in the financial industry. It was like, it's rocks. It was just fabulous. It was just like the coolest thing ever. Yeah. And you're gonna have these moments. You're gonna have the moments that suck. You know, the moments where like, you do an instant response, the bad guys seem like they're winning. Um, I've had days where I worked 35-hour shift, had to jam a pen in my leg and ruin a pair of my jeans so I could stay awake on the drive home. Don't do that. You should really Uber, but this is before Uber. Uh, and slept on the server room floor. But man, what a cool ride,
I
right?
know. I mean, all these things,
Yeah,
are part of your journey, right? That make
they are.
it's the seasoning along the career, right? Because everything isn't
It
always
is.
perfect. So yeah,
No,
you
it's
know,
not. But chicks dig scars, right?
yeah,
And
of
and we
course.
create we create. Sorry for the misogyny there. It's not really intended misogyny, but it's just like the trite phrases. And my wife doesn't actually dig scars, but but scars are what makes you, right? You're able to look at that and go like, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that's the time that this happened to me,
Yeah.
and I'm a better person because of it.
Yeah. We learn and
Yeah,
grow from these mistakes and missteps, right? You mentioned
absolutely.
the thing about staying technical too long, right? Then there's a flip side of that when you get into leadership roles and then
Yeah,
people start to question, oh, well, are you still, can we trust that you're technically sharp? And that's the kind of route that happened in my career. So I started
yeah,
off technical. I worked to a point where I was the IT coordinator was a position during 2019, 2020 for DuPont in Laplace, Louisiana. So I had the experience of working at a chemical facility.
been there. Nice
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I was IT coordinator there for Dow Elastomers is the official name of the company, and so made neoprene. Anyhow, so I had a small team of people. It was my first leadership management experience, and of course, since then I've been IM, ISSM. I've had a lot of different titles. I've been an executive a few times and a program manager for an NSA program called Commercial Solutions for Classified. But what's funny is every now and then I have colleagues and people in the industry that will rib me. Like there's this one guy I know. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's in Asia, and he's one of the best firewall network engineers that I've ever known personally. And so I've always ribbed him because he only has like a CCNP. And so I said, Guy, you should already be a triple CCIE with your experience and knowledge. Why don't you? And he actually has a small rack of the equipment he needs to train on. He's already
yeah,
right there at the gateway of it. So then he just pushed it. So whenever like other year, I'll see him post something on socials, and then I'll send him a message privately, say, "Hey, when are you gonna get that CCIE?" So a few months ago, he pushed back to me. He goes, "Well, you claim to be a networking expert and this and that." He goes, "You get your CCIE, and once you get it, I'll get it." I said, "Look, I don't have the time right now to dedicate to doing the lab portion, but I will get the highest level security focused one, which is you got to do the route switch first, and then I did the firepower, but I did the
yeah.
CCNP security." So within 48 hours of that phone call, I just went and took both exams and I passed it. Just kind of prove to him like, no, just because you think I'm a paper tiger, I still have the technical know-how and I have a very
Hmm.
good memory of all the Cisco, Juniper, and all the other devices I've had to work on. But a year ago, I decided to pursue my bachelor's of cybersecurity information assurance with WGU. I had a lot of colleagues telling me, "Hey Jim, I know you're in your fourth quarter of your career, but you should still get the degree." I have two daughters that are seniors in college right now, and kind of like, I can't let my girls beat me to the finish line, but I will do it in a speed run. So I looked at all their transferable credits because I did an application, but I have all these higher level
Hmm.
certs. They basically only gave me credit for like CISP, CEH. That was pretty much it. And I said, that's it. So I looked at all of because as a bachelor's, they're looking at people that are much younger than I am that have, probably
They do make
certification.
revenue by having you pay for classes too. So I mean, there is that. But
There's an
anyway, continue.
agenda, but this is what I did. I did the math. I said, you know what? To save time and guarantee that I pass in one 6 month period or term, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all of these certifications that qualify me. So I did a little map. So I had to do like Linux Essentials, CCSK for the cloud. I did a CISM as well, just to check all these
Uh-huh.
other boxes. So I transferred into maximum allowable credits. But during that journey, I had to do like a Python cert, the PCAP and so forth. And it was funny because mentioning that development, I've done only a little bit of development along my career, but it was fun to go back to those basics because thank God it was introductory. So I'm gonna mea culpa. It was introductory stuff because if it had been any more advanced, I
Hmm.
might have failed. But what I did though was I did 15 certifications in 21 days to be able to have all those credentials.
Holy crap!
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's crazy.
So a lot of
Like,
my colleagues that were privy to that, every day I would post about, I passed this one in 45 minutes. I passed this one in 50 minutes. I don't think I spent more than 1 hour on any of those exams, but all of my colleagues was like, you still got it. And it felt good as an older man. It still feels good that, with a lot of younger colleagues I got now that are coming up and going, oh, I got this. Can you get this cert? And every now and then I'll take them up on a challenge. So I had
hmm,
this one young
hmm.
guy that I was mentoring that said, "Hey, I'm struggling with the CYSA. It's a CompTIA a security analyst."
Right, right.
And I said, "Sure, I'll go take it." So within a week, I went and picked up the cert, and then I was like, "All right, I got the CYSA. Now you need
Right.
to go complete your journey and get the CYSA." But I love that
Yeah.
aspect. So since we're talking about certs, you mentioned earlier, and then this is something I want to stress to everybody out there. This wonderful initiative by ISC Square called Certified in Cybersecurity. It's called CC for short. and they did a pledge of 1 million vouchers. And it's not just a voucher, it's actually register, you get free training. So you'll log in with your account and get all of the training for the
One
certification.
year for free. Yeah.
1 year for free, and you get the voucher code to register at a testing center to go take the exam and get a credential. Now, I'll be honest, that credential is not going to get you your first job because right now it's still brand new. I mean, it's been a couple years, but it's relatively, as far as industry is concerned,
But
I would say
we are seeing it showing up on job descriptions, which is very encouraging. Like we
good.
started seeing that almost a full year ago, that it was actually showing up as a requirement in certain jobs,
That's what we
which is
need. Yeah.
fabulous. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, like I said earlier, it's not just a certification; it's certification plus these other things. But we had this issue with cybersecurity. We've had it for a long time. Is well, I have to have this experience to get the job, but how can I get a job if I don't have the experience? Right? There's this vicious cycle. And
Yes.
there are some ways around that, right? Like if you're in that situation, there are so many nonprofits that need help, right? There's a local liberal arts university, a Catholic university or whatever that has like no money, but they need help. There's a library, it's somebody. And you can go in, you can pen test their site, you can secure their systems, you can do so much work, and then like, hey, I did this thing, and you can hold it up and done. I've done incident response for nonprofits and able to show like, hey, actually I had this actual work and liaison to FBI and work this thing and as APT blah 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 and yeah, and they can pay no, but I got this experience.
Got the experience.
Um, but the CC was specifically designed, and I'm very proud of this. We launched this in my first year back on the board of the ISC2, um, and we launched the certified in cybersecurity examination. And it was specifically designed as this bridge from people that wanted to get into the field because there really wasn't that bridge. I mean, Security Plus requires some technical chops, but it's fairly vertical, right? It's you actually have to, and I'm not dissing it. We already talked about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like I love the Security Plus. It's a great path, but it's not a path for everybody. And there are some people that like going, but I don't have Linux administration. I don't have Windows administration. I don't really understand those aspects to it. But there's so much things you can there's so many things in our field you can do that
Mhm.
aren't specific to knowing what runs on what port, right?
Yeah.
And the attack vectors that happen specifically to those two platforms. And so there's this great certification that we have now, the CC. It had a meteoric rise. Now when we launched it in I think the fourth month, I became treasurer of the ISC2, and we had a few critics that were going like, "Oh, you're just trying to make money." It's like, dude, like if you could see how much red is in our portfolio right now, we are like doing this serious dive into our assets. Like, oh my God, pull up, pull up, pull up, because we had this beautiful success story, this huge pickup. I mean, it was tremendous, but like we didn't allocate like this is a lot more spending than we actually thought we'd have in year one because we're handing out a lot of stuff for free. It's still the right thing to do. So, I
The
have
right
to
thing
have
to
faith
do.
it's the right thing, right? And I'm so glad we had that vision. I mean, it was really started before I joined the board. Some of our previous board members said, like, man, we have to have something to fill this gap. There's this big gap. People are complaining they can't get in. How are we going to create the path in?
Yeah, because the barrier to entry
And
for some folks is too much, and
it is.
and when people start looking at the ocean of options and training courses, universities selling courses, and these boot camps, and of course the bad side of the certification industry. I was just actually talking to Stephen Graham, one of the North America founders for EC Council at Hacker Halted about this whole test dump industry. That's just it is just this dark underbelly that we need to eradicate. And I actually, not to go too far off topic, but I said we eventually need to get the not ANSI, but the accreditation ASAP. I forget the acronym, the Accreditation Authority Board to
It's
accept
Anzi. Yeah.
ANSI to accept a provision to allow AI generated instances of tests. And I say this so that each test an exam taker takes is unique for that point in time to that. And the copy is stored in the servers and backed up in logs so that it can be validated. You don't have like 8 versions of the exam that eventually over time these scammers will get copies of however they do it and compile these test dumps. And of course, the
Mhm.
test dump industry, anyone watching this, look, it's better to, instead of trying to memorize hundreds of questions, just study the content because you're going to need to understand and really know the content in your job when you get it. So I
Right.
really strongly encourage anyone watching
Mhm.
this is that if someone says, "Oh, go pay this, a couple $100 for this test stuff," it will not serve your career well. In
Right.
fact,
Oh
eventually,
no, no,
yeah,
that's a horrible idea. It's like cheating on your driver's exam and let's go out and drive.
yeah,
Like yeah, but you'll die, right? Like you're gonna actually have to do things.
yeah, you're
Like
gonna have to do things.
you're
But
gonna like you're gonna
yeah.
come around a corner and there'll be a decision you have to make and like,
Yeah.
oh, I wish I had that driver's
So what
ed
I
thing,
would
but I didn't.
encourage
So
yourself
yeah.
as a board member and anyone else in ISC Squared that might ever watch this is that, as I recommended to Steve Graham, is that if they could eventually push for that initiative to adopt an AI-based system, that will completely eradicate overnight, once it's
Mhm.
implemented with the different testing providers, it will eradicate test dumps, which it will strengthen the branding and the integrity of the exams 100% overnight. And I truly believe
Well,
that's something to be looked into eventually.
yeah, I can't get deep into that. I will say that I've helped develop a couple examinations. Like I helped develop the HCISPP and as well the now defunct forensics examination that ISU2 had. Um, and I've done a lot of test running for the CISSP, and I've been very impressed by this whole field I didn't even know until about 15 years ago. I started getting into it, psychometrics.
Mm.
It's basically how can I prove somebody knows something, right?
Yep.
Psycho, you know something, and metrics, I can measure it, right? How do you actually know, right? How do you avoid a false positive? How do you avoid a false negative? And there's a lot of complexity there. So I can't get deep into it, of course, because of NDA and et cetera. We are
Yes.
looking at AI. AI is both it's not an actual Chinese proverb, but allegedly one. That have danger plus opportunity. Um, and the ability to use AI in the creation of test bases and test systems is one opportunity, as well as the challenge of being able to keep AI from being able to punk exams and create artificial positives where people are granted a
Yeah.
certification they didn't earn. It is. We talked earlier in this podcast about the Red Queen's race of multi-factor auth, and this is another area of continual spy versus spy. I continually like they do this thing and we counter, etc. And that's why ISC2 has gone to adaptive exams because there are people who get paid with eidetic memories. That's the people who actually have a photographic memory.
Hmm.
And they get paid to go in and take an examination, and they show up with anomalies because they do what psychometricians call pulling a monkey, which is a monkey could slam on a keyboard and get the same score you are. You're getting a 25% because there are four opportunities for multiple choice, and random distribution would create the same results you're getting. Bye bye, you're done. And the ability to then protect all the rest of the questions that could have occurred, and to be able to take those exact questions and no longer have to be able to say we're publishing an exam. This is exam number 117. We've actually spent all the time. We published this thing. It's kind of a life of 2 years or whatever. And now there's a test bank from which we're pulling random questions interactively in real time with an adaptive exam with thresholds. And when you've gotten to the point where we know you have the knowledge, you've succeeded, you're climbing up and up and up, and you're done, we stop the exam. Congratulations. Or there's no possible way you can pass, you're climbing down and down and down. And like, hey, you missed these two questions on cryptography. We're going to ask you two more questions on cryptography. Oh, you got those wrong too? Or you got a 50-50? Yeah, I don't think you know crypto.
Hmm.
And so the ability to then is like going, you can't possibly pass. We're done. And we're not going to reveal any more questions to that person.
Hmm.
But we have this rich repository of data that's coming in, and I can't speak to that
Of course,
individually
of
for a
course.
number of reasons. Um, but you know, the ability for us to be able to slice and dice that now and be able to do some we're doing some really incredible work. Like Casey Marks is the head of psychometrics and exam development for ISC2. He actually created the NCLEX for nursing. And my daughter is a nurse practitioner, and she found out that he created the NCLEX. She's like, he's the devil, because it's a really hard exam. He did some fabulous work there, and we poached him, brought him over. He's like, oh, so good, so good. Dr. Marks is fabulous, and he's been able to create this incredibly potent set of capabilities. But we all faced with COVID, like, well, now what? Here we are in April of 2020. We can't just not do certification exams for the near future, right? People rely on those, organizations rely on those. Certification bodies need that to be able to generate revenue to continue operating. What now? And a lot of organizations went to a remote examination where you have a camera-based proctor. And we looked very hard at that. And Dr. Marks did some papers and he published in that. And we looked at it too and said, like, no, we're just seeing way too many anomalies. A lot of, as we talked about just for the podcast, you talked about it, about exam irregularities. We saw a lot of weird stuff and said, nope, nope. If you look at you talk to people that are in the industry for testing, ISU2's at the top, man. We're crushing it, but there's a lot of investment it takes to be king of the hill.
Yep.
Right? Like we created an examination that's $1 million. I mean, literally. I don't know the exact number, but it's about
Yeah,
$1
it's
million.
it's a lot. It's a lot
It's a
involved
lot.
into
It's a lot.
creating this
And
stuff.
and that's why I really warn people about trial exams, right? They have the practice exams. Do you think anybody invests $1 million in a practice exam?
No,
They don't. They
no.
don't. And so I mean a practice exam, like, I know this is not much question you asked, but I'll throw it out here because people get the number one issue I faced over 20 years of developing exams on the board, teaching everything else with certifications. Number one issue is practice exams. Like, oh man, I scored an 80% on the practice exams. I failed the examination. They're using it, right?
Yeah,
Okay, you recognize this,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's like, no, you're using them wrong. A practice exam is, if you know the answer, great. You check the box. If you're guessing, you have to count that as wrong, or at
Yes.
least 50% wrong, right? Like, I'm going to create that as if I happen to guess correctly, like, okay, maybe I had two of the tempting answers that I knew were red
And
herrings or
then
were
you
not
flip the
correct,
coin.
but you really didn't know it. And for you to take the guess as good as yes, that's the problem.
Yep.
So a practice exam only tells you the areas of weakness in which you need more study. It
Yes.
doesn't say I'm done, I'm ready. And that's the biggest problem I see people having with practice exams, is using in them the wrong
The
way.
wrong way. And I
Um,
hear that too, Dan. When people say, well, I scored this score and that score. First thing I challenge them, and I love your advice about identify even the guesses, note that topic so you can fill that knowledge gap that you experience on that practice exam. I also tell people because they'll take one practice exam, go take the real exam, and come out going, I don't know what happened. I said, well, one practice exam is not enough. You should take several because you don't know the random pool per domain. It may only give you one application security question or one cryptography question, but you'll get five on your real exam. You
right,
need to
right.
take more than one to kind of fully vet your gaps, right? So I'm a big fan of Clements from csecure. .edu. He's been in it since the Sean Harris days. He has a wonderful and regularly updated CISSP practice question bank, and it has a study mode where if you get it wrong, it immediately tells you what the answer is and the source it's citing from. I love it for that. It's very affordable. So anyone that's looking to prepare for, and they have other certifications that they have test banks for, do practice your and identify your knowledge gap. So I'll include that also in the description below. It's something that I always recommend to colleagues, and I'm recommending to those you watching. We could talk forever, Dan, because you're just a wealth of knowledge, and all the knowledge you've given is like handing free diamonds here on the internet, diamonds of
Oh,
information. So thank you. Again, you're a titan in industry, and love that you're still in cyber with us because we need you. You're like a general in cyber. I do
no, no. I'm
I'd
just
like
like,
to kind of, we've talked a lot of certs, a lot of technical stuff. I'd like to take a moment to kind of do some levity, some fun questions. All right, Dan, if you're ready to humor me, I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. There's no right or wrong answer. So let's go. Okay. This divides the room. All right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
ooh, until Disney bought Star Wars, and I saw Star Wars 156 times in the theater because when you're 12,
Whoa.
you make bad decisions. Yeah. Yeah, literally 156 times in the theater, I saw Star Wars. And a huge fan. And what really pissed me off was Lucas made the promise to all the authors that had created all these universes,
Canon.
the Wookiee
Yeah.
planet and everything else. He said, look, you guys can do whatever you want post number six,
Yeah.
right? But I own everything prior to Return of the Jedi. Like everything before that is mine. Do whatever you want afterwards. And then Disney bought him, and he broke the promise. And so Trekkie,
Okay.
Trekkie,
All right. Reversal
hardcore.
there. All right.
Yeah, I gotta go.
All
But
right.
my boys.
Next one. Cake or pie?
Oh, pie.
Pie. What kind of pie?
My grandmother made this delicious strawberry rhubarb pie
Ooh.
that was just it was strawberry rhubarb custard, and it was delicious. And unfortunately, with Alzheimer's, the recipe died with her,
Ah,
and we did not capture it. But basically fruit pies, like almost any
nice.
fruit pie. My wife actually won a blue ribbon at the Ohio State Fair based on
Nice.
her apple pie, so she
Wow.
crushed it.
Okay.
Yeah, a little maple syrup added there during the final cooking phases. I'm like, good
Wow.
stuff. Yeah.
Oh goodness, you threw me off to me thinking about apple pie. I'm sorry. Is a is a hot dog a sandwich?
Ooh, or is a hot dog a taco?
Ha! Good response, my man. Good response. What has been your most favorite book of all time you've read, and what is the last book you've read?
Ooh, favorite book of all time. Man, that is a hard question. Favorite book of all time. Certain books changed my life when I read them.
Hmm.
And I have to go with two.
Okay.
The Hobbit and Dune.
Ooh, good combo there.
Those
Fantasy, high
those
fantasy.
those both changed my life when I read them. And like, and just for grins, I'm gonna throw in the Stainless Steel Rat because that's just enjoyable fiction. But anyway, but they got me thinking on a different plane. And
Hmm.
and and both of those are obviously in the fiction realm. But if I had to say the best nonfiction that really rocked my world,
Cryptography demystified.
possibly not that one.
What was it?
You know, uh, I'm gonna have to say it was Stahl's. I remember the exact title is on the Cuckoo's Egg, and he talked about the compromise at Deck and how he and it went through a number of hackers. He talked about Mitnick
Yeah.
and Stoll and all the rest. But it was and Polson. But he talked about the Cuckoo's Egg, and that was also a text that changed my life when I read it and changed my perspectives on the universe.
Hmm. Wow.
But last books I read,
Okay.
um, due to the magic of pausing and restarting, I did go off and run and grab from the library the last two books. Well, I
Yeah.
couldn't grab the one, which is my good friend Greg Ellifritz has written a great book, but I only have it on Kindle at the moment because I'm moving, so it's somewhere in a box. My physical
Okay.
copies, all right. Which is Choose a Life of Adventure, and it's safe travel in unsafe places. I
Okay.
encourage you highly. I've done a lot of international travel. He and I both have a thirst for adventure and vacationing in places where you can't drink the water,
Yeah.
and I learned a lot about that. And he even covers women's issues like hey, you're not going to get feminine products in this country because they have a whole different way of looking at it than you do. So so it's like it's not just his experience, but he thinks outside the box for all the different things. Like
Wow.
what you like how to be what's referred to, sorry ladies, as the gray man. like he's a great person that, just melts into the background, which with this beard you don't do. But it's a fabulous book. I encourage you. But in the field, hacking multi-factor authentication, this book rocks. And I particularly love Roger Grimes is with oh shoot, I got a mental block on the name of the company. They're one of the best at security training. Know Before.
No, before.
He
Okay,
was
yeah.
Yeah, and I love Know Before. Those guys rock. Their
I mean,
training is
Mitnick, that
so
was the
good.
last company he was with, and
Mimic,
gone too soon.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And Roger Grimes works for them. This is not in their wheelhouse. This is not him promoting security awareness training. This is his speaking from his passion and his love. This is a good book. Hacking
excellent.
multi-factored auth. I'm in the field. I've been talking about it for a while. I've been teaching it. I read this and I learned a lot. So this is gold. And the other one that I would grab, um, speaking to one of my hobbies, proficient motorcycling. Um, the most the most important piece of safety gear you have as a motorcyclist is between your ears. And
Okay.
this book has saved my life at least twice, where I was thinking differently when I got what's referred to as the wobble of death or tank slapper, when your handlebars do an oscillation of 2 to 4 hertz. And if you know what that means they're going lock to lock and back again 2 to 4 times a second. And I was going 65 miles an hour at night in the rain on the highway, 70 miles an hour, and had a wobble of death and didn't die. So this this is a great book. If you want to do motorcycling, if you're doing motorcycling, this could possibly save your life. This is
Love it.
the compendium of David Ho and his 35, 40 years of writing for motorcycling magazines that created the foundation of the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, which is the foundation of all the training that you get formally for how to not die in a motorcycle.
Not that. Well, we'll
Yeah.
have the links for all of those books and make sure I get them, Dan, and we'll put them in the description below. Dan, I know we got to wrap up real quick. I did want to ask, I know that you got a lot of energy and you do a lot of different work, charity work, volunteer work, nonprofit work. Is there any of these that you want to shine a light on and just kind of mention? And we'll include the links to those below as well that you would like to shine a light on and acknowledge.
Right, right. So I'll call it a couple. Obviously, I have a penchant for ISU2. I've poured a lot of passion and my time into ISU2. And when I was on the board before, I joined ISU2 with the intent of not just giving back and doing the right thing and all the rest of that, but also establishing term limits, because there were no effective term limits in ISU2 at the time, then ISU squared. And we got those done in the course. 6 years later, I termed out because I'd been successful at term limits. But one thing we created while I was there, what I was very proud of, is I was the co-sponsor of the Women in Security Initiative and co-founder of what we now call um, the uh, the Center for Cyber Safety and Education, which it was then the ISC2 Foundation. We renamed it, and it does fabulous work teaching youth and seniors how to be safe online, and that's a real big issue,
Yeah.
particularly with seniors and children. I've taught of the safe and secure online, and a few times I would ask. I have an auditorium of 500 kids, and I ask them, how many of you have met somebody in the real world that you first met online? And like about 40% of the hands went up. All right. So, okay, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Now, put your hands down if your parents or a teacher knew you were meeting them. Half the hands. 20% of the kids had met somebody online. They met some in the real world that they met online. They had no idea who they were, and
Mhm.
their parents or teachers didn't know that
Mhm.
they were meeting them. And this is how kids disappear,
Um,
right?
yeah.
That's serious stuff, man. But
Yeah.
also, the center also does scholarships, millions of dollars given away to disadvantaged communities. We talked about the CC. One of the targets of the 1 million in certified in cybersecurity is that we specifically target disadvantaged communities. We've seen a huge pickup in Southeast Asia, and in sub-Saharan Africa, and et cetera, where we're actually seeing a lot of our mission actually being successful with those communities that are disadvantaged,
Hmm.
And if you are not in a disadvantaged community, I encourage you, if you take the CC, go ahead and pay for it, because you're having to pay for somebody else who's in an economy where, $5 a day is riches,
Yeah.
and they are just, going to bed hungry 2, 3, 4 nights a week. And for you, it's the cost of not having a latte one time a week for
Yeah.
6 months, and it's totally different. So go ahead and pay for it. And I'm so proud of the work we've done there with scholarships. And another nonprofit, I'll point, actually technically non-for-profit. I'll just point this out because it's a fabulous learning lab for the soft skills that are just vital to success in our profession, is Toastmasters.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's so important. Um, Toastmasters is a learning lab for communications, for leadership, for being able to think on your feet, being able to project and achieve results in your daily work. And if you get everything you possibly can out of Toastmasters, you'll never get out of Toastmasters. I mean, it is a true learning lab. It's going to the gym for your brain. I do support other charities, mostly aligned with my Christian faith, and do give in that regard. But as far as secular causes that are doing fabulous work, um, the Center for Cyber Safety and Education of ISU2 and Toastmasters, I think, are
Okay.
fabulous ones to invest in, for the good of our profession.
Excellent. Well, all of those links will be in the description below. Dan's going to get them all to me. You don't have to Google search it. Just click the description, and the links will be a links galore for you to just click on. Dan, I know we need to wrap up, but I wanted to give you an opportunity for the last word. So, in regards to some of the things we talked about earlier, you mentioned, cyber safety, multi-factor authentication, defense in depth. But if you had a final word for someone that's on the fence, like, I don't know if I want to get my toes in the water of the cyber career. Maybe I should stay being an accountant or whatever career path I'm in. What would you say to that person is not sure?
So, if I can share something with you, let me see if I can pull this up here. I'm going to go ahead and share screen.
Okay.
Um, I'm going to share something that it took me. I was 35 before I figured this out, so I'm going to share it with you folks here.
Okay.
Um, and simple Venn diagram here. You see, I have the four spheres, and the bottom three are the ones I knew existed, right? And I represent that. The one with the dollar sign is, this is doing things for which you can be paid,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Got to
Uh,
make
uh,
it,
the
earn a
one
living.
right, the one on the right, doing things you're good at, right? And hopefully there's an intersection between those things, because if you're things that people will pay you to do but you're not good at, you're not in a great place. And then the bottom one there, things you love, right?
Yes.
So I love fishing, right? That's great. You might love golf and bowling, but unless you're Tiger Woods, or you're on the bowling tour,
Yeah.
nobody's going to pay you for those. You're
Yeah.
only intersecting in the things you love and the things you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
Or for me, golf is the things I love that I'm not good at. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So I only knew about the bottom three, and I had this epiphany moment. I already mentioned BMW Financial, great organization, love the organization. Dedicated to excellence, had a good time there, and was there 5 years. And I was doing work that I loved, I was good at. They paid decent. I was making a decent wage, but it wasn't quite enough. And I realized there was a fourth circle, and that's that top circle. And I just chose the cross there as a Christian, but whatever you want to put there, call that mission.
Yeah.
How you see your mission in the world, and the world around you, and what it is that makes you complete. And I realized, as fine a work as that organization does, BMW Financial, just my perspective was, there's a good part of that that's about helping people afford cars they necessarily couldn't afford,
Mm.
to perhaps be able to snub their nose at their neighbors, and say, look, I have two Beamers in the driveway. Now that's a twisted view of that. I'm doing that on purpose, right? BMWs are fabulous machines. I love driving them. They're just fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
But it is really far from feeding starving children,
Yes.
right? And I had this moment where it's like going, this really isn't missional for me. This really is not aligning with what I would consider doing good
in the world.
for the world. Exactly. And when you can get the alignment of something you're good at, something they pay you for, and something you love to do, like I'd found that already. Like, oh man, I would do this for free. I hope they don't find out how much fun I'm having because they'll stop paying me. But I'm having a ball, right? I love this. I'm good at it, and they're paying me decent money. But man, if it's empty, not good. And so then I went to work for Nationwide Insurance, who, when there's a hurricane that devastates, they roll with a semi full of diapers and food and water and checks to put communities back together. It was like, okay, I can see this helps people out in a very fundamental way in Maslow's hierarchy, helps
Yes.
recreate communities, helps protect people. And as awesome as BMW cars are, love them, great, fabulous. It's more aligned with my mission and what I believe is important in my life. And I believe this is to me being in the center of this, like, man, when you are at the center of this, you whistle while you work, you come in, everything's aligned. Oh, it's just glorious. This is where you
Love it.
want to be. And so many opportunities in cybersecurity give you the opportunity to reach beyond yourself and say, I'm not just doing the right thing by my company, I'm doing the right thing for the world.
I love that.
This is helping out humanity. I'm stopping the bad guys. I'm protecting the elderly. I'm defending communities that I may never see or meet or anything else. And yet I can contribute to the greater good in this way.
I love
And
it.
it's a noble profession. Like I
Yeah.
didn't see that coming into it. It surprised me, and I found it. It's like, holy crap, this is really cool. Like this is actually missional.
Yep.
And I encourage you. I have these belly button moments, contemplation of my space in the universe and everything around it. And I encourage you to have that every 5 years or so, and to
Wow.
say, are these four things in alignment? And if they're not, make a career change, man.
Yep.
Like, like if one of these things is out of alignment, like you're not loving what you're doing, you're in a job that's not paying well, you're in a job that's not missionally aligned. And I've had that before. Like my mission changed. And I'm like going, I can't do this job anymore. My mission's changed. I got to do something different.
Mhm.
Totally worth it. Right. I
Love
can make a lot more money doing different work.
that. Yes, of
Really. I've
course.
had the
Yeah.
conversation with my daughter turned 17 in a private school. She's like, when everybody else is getting a Mercedes, like, well, let me tell you why. Like your
Yep.
daddy can make a lot more money if I lived out of a suitcase 50 weeks a year, but you
Yeah.
never see me.
Yeah.
And it's important I'm here for you.
There are things that are
So
more valuable than money.
they are.
You know, I
They
love
are.
that you
And so
shared
like,
this
yeah.
Venn diagram because this is a wonderful life perspective that anyone that's brand new and if you're a young person, this is diamonds right here of a perspective that you should adopt as early as possible. You know, having that why, that purpose of what you're doing everything for is important. You know, when I did TopCyberPro.com during the pandemic, I'm not going to go into the story due to time, but for those that understand the story of why I started TopCyberPro.com, I don't do contracts. I don't do, my partner wanted to do subscriptions and contracts. I said, no, cancel anytime. Because, and then the other thing was, it's like, well, we need to put a curriculum and charge 1,000, 1,500. I said, no, we're going to make it $50 a month, cancel anytime. Because I know people are suffering financially and I'm not going to take advantage of that. And to me, you're $50 away. I tell people that I run into in travels, etc. Said, when you're ready, after you've done YouTube University, after you read all of the links and the NIST documents and all the free training, then sign up for your 1 month and cancel when you got all the information you need. Go get your test, go get your resume updated, go get your job. Cancel. We don't need to keep you as a lifetime member, and that's what I tell people. And my business partner hates me for this, but he's focused on the dollars of it. But when you mention mission and purpose, the purpose is to help people and bridge that gap. Well, Dan, we could talk forever, and I want to just extend an open invite to you. At any time in the future you want to come back on the podcast, you are welcome anytime. You are a titan and
Thank
just
you,
a
brother.
beast in cyber, and I'm so fortunate to be able to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for your time, and everyone watching, rest assured, all of the links are below. And with that, follow. I'll have also his socials as well, so you can keep up with the tremendous work and stuff that Dan does in cybersecurity because it's tremendous. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you, brother. Appreciate it.